before you practice emergency stops, you need to understand, how to do it and why you should be doing it a certain way. So you got your front brake and you have your rear brake. And there's a certain way you need to apply your front brake and rear brake. And you should build your way up to emergency stops. So basically you apply pressure and you add more. The rear brake, you apply pressure, maybe a little bit more and then less. And there's a reason behind that, and I'll explain that in just a minute. So the maximum amount of brake pressure you could put on a wheel, the front wheel or the rear, is determined by a few different factors. You have the rotational speed of the wheel, you have the weight, and you have how much grip, the road surface itself. So there's a lot of different things that will determine how much brake pressure you could put on a wheel before you lose traction. And you see some people will slam on the brakes so hard that you gain so much traction just instantly and just kind of flip over. That does happen sometimes. Or you lose traction. And now loss of traction could be the wheel sliding or ABS kicks in. And ABS will cause your stopping distance to increase. And I'll put a video down below that will explain a little bit more about that. But one major factor is how much downward force is on each wheel. So if you add downward force to one wheel, you can increase the amount of brake pressure before it loses grip. You have the front wheel, you have the rear, and if you shift your weight in a similar way, you have most of your weight back here, and you drag your foot, it's pretty easy to get that front wheel, that would be the front wheel, to get it to slip. But as you shift your weight forward, you start applying pressure, it's more difficult to get that wheel to slip. And more. And as you start to apply more pressure, you have most of the weight now, it's very difficult to get that front wheel to slip. But it's pretty easy now to get the rear wheel to slip. That's why you need to apply pressure. That's too much too soon. You cause the wheel to slip, or it might lock up and throw you over. ABS kicking in increases your braking distance, but you want to avoid a loss of traction. So what you want to do is apply pressure and then apply more as you increase the downward force on that tire. Now this is all provided you have a good road surface. A bad road surface, well, good luck. Hope you're wearing some gear and a helmet at least, because your weight is moving forward, but it's adding more downward force to the tire. As you add more downward force to the tire, you can then add more brake pressure. As for the rear, so if you start out with this much pressure and this much braking power, as you have less weight on that wheel, you end up with the same amount of braking power, and then you reach a point where the rear wheel will start sliding. You have to take away brake pressure. So you start out, you apply pressure, maybe a little bit more, and then less. I don't really apply a lot, like in any situation. With this rear brake here, I may apply like this much, maybe a little bit more sometimes, but that's about it. It can go actually pretty far. Well, I've never pushed it down that far. So like I said, you got rotational speed of the wheel, blah blah blah, and this and that and some other stuff, but like downward force into the pavement causes. So I'm going to go up to about 20 miles an hour, and I'm going to describe to you what I'm doing with the front brake, and I'm just going to do what I end up doing with the rear brake, and then I'm going to come back and do the same thing with the front, but then describe the rear. Right? Does that make any sense? Don't forget to downshift if that's relevant to you. Alright. So about 20 miles an hour, front brake, pressure, more, and I'm stopped. So that's a faster than normal stop. Not necessarily emergency stop, and I forgot to downshift. I just told you not to forget to downshift. So we'll do that again. So I'm going to describe the second, describing the front wheel or the front brake, right? So pressure, more, and I downshift. With the rear brake, you want to apply pressure and then less. You need to apply pressure on the rear and then decrease it as you have less grip on that tire. The more your weight shifts forward on the front. So, now I'm going to describe the rear brake. I'm going 23. Let's go about 20. And you start about 20 miles an hour. So, I'm going to brake. I'm describing the rear. So, more, less. And I'm in first gear. Like magic, I was in first gear. Check that out. So this is what you should be doing before you practice emergency stops. Front brake, pressure, more, downshift, and I'm stopped. And like I said, rear brake was pressure, more, less. So understanding you're putting more downward force as you apply more pressure. That's the gist of it. You want to do faster than normal stops. So you do a couple normal stops. Like I said, is relative to how much grip or how much pressure, downward force you're putting on the so quicker than normal stops, and then you could do emergency stops. See if I could do a nice little U-turn and then readjust my camera. Whee! Slow U-turn, but it worked.